Okay, I think we're almost there, so we have a countdown for getting ourselves all prepared for this evening. And welcome everybody to Cabinet this evening. Those that are watching us on YouTube and those that are here. If I could just ask those that are participating this evening, if you can make sure that you can speak very close to the microphone. I think for the purpose of YouTube, last time there were one or two issues that didn't get a very good bandwidth on that at all, so that's absolutely fine. So if I can just get myself organised with the agenda. Okay, item 1, authorise me to sign the minutes of the last meeting held on Monday, the 24th of May 2021 as a correct record of the proceedings.
So move.
Thank you very much. Very much. Apologies for absence, Lisa.
None received, Chairman.
Thank you. Additional agenda items?
There are none, Chairman.
Thank you very much indeed. Urgent decisions?
Yes, Chairman. Agenda item 17, additional restrictions, grant discretionary business restart grant scheme is an urgent item.
Thank you for that. And disclosure of interests? Appear to be any this evening? Fine. I would just point out that agenda item 14 has been withdrawn. And for the benefit of Chris, we're going to kick off with item 17 as the first item on the agenda, Chris. So if I can invite you please to, let me just get this here. So the additional restrictions grant discretionary business restart grant scheme, report of Chris Watchman, revenues and benefits manager. Thank you, Chris.
Okay, thank you. Members were aware that lifting of the remaining COVID-19 restrictions have been delayed until the 19th of July. As a result, this will in particular impact businesses that operate as public houses, restaurants and cafes, where due to the continuation of restrictions, they're unable to operate at capacity. This is in a particularly vulnerable area of the economy dominated by small businesses and sole traders, many of which will have substantial fixed property costs. Therefore, the report proposes that these businesses receive a further grant from the Additional Restrictions Grant Fund to cover the extra 4 weeks. The amount of the grant will be based on a proportion of the recent National Business Restart grants, and based on initial calculations, in excess of 170 local businesses could benefit from this extra help. In taking this action, the Council is also likely to spend all of the original £2.75 million of funding by the deadline, which will then enable the Council to qualify for additional top-up funding in the region of £700,000, allowing further grant schemes to be developed to support eligible businesses over the remainder of the financial year. Members are asked to approve the extension of the scheme as detailed in the report and give delegated authority to the Chief Executive in consultation with the relevant Cabinet portfolio holders to finalise the amounts of the grants and the detailed criteria. Also looking for delegated authority to amend the scheme further to enable a swift award of grants to other business sectors that have fixed or additional business costs that officers or members become aware of that are being severely impacted by the continuation of restrictions. Yeah.
Thank you for that report, Chris. And we all know the sterling work that you and your team have done, and I know that there are councillors here that would like to make observations towards that. If we can invite Councillor Kevin Dixon, please. Oh, sorry, Christine. Councillor Christine Bayliss, yes.
Yes, thank you. Thank you very much. And I'd like to thank Chris Watchman and his small but perfectly formed team for the work that they've done in supporting businesses. I've chaired the post-COVID recovery steering group, and as my role as in economic development and regeneration, I mean, obviously I've taken a really keen interest in making sure that our grant schemes have supported businesses so that they can survive the pandemic. And we have been exceptionally good at getting the money out of the door. I know that there are businesses in other bits of East Sussex that would complain vociferously about their local council support, but our businesses locally have been supported really well by Rother District Council. We've supported over 1,000 businesses locally, 1,071, and we have churned out millions of pounds in support. So I'd like to thank Chris for his team. I mean, I know that people have come to me and said, oh, you know, I find it hard to get online, you know, make the claims. And you've given, or your team have given, sort of one-to-one support to those people. So it's tremendous job that you've done, and we should be very proud as a council of the work that we've done to support our businesses through the pandemic.
Absolutely spot on, and you know, it's real to be proud of the work that's being done. And Kevin, I know this report's been brought forward with yourself, working with Chris and Robin and the Chief Executive in preparing this report.
Yes, thank you, Chairman, and obviously I'd like to echo.
I just want to be sure and clear that people don't have to apply, do they? We're going to approach them directly and say this money's available and you qualify. Is that correct?
Absolutely, yes.
Just in case anyone listening thinks they've got to go and have another application.
We'll
okay, thank you very much.
Thank you for making that point. Finally, if we can go to a vote on this, it's been moved and second. Yep. All those sort of in favour? That's pretty straightforward. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you very much indeed, Chris, for joining us this evening, and the acknowledgement from members right and the whole of the administration and the council for the work that you've done. And it's great that we've been ahead of local authorities near to us. Where, you know, that's very, very important that we've got on with it. Thank you very much indeed. And you'd like to go home now, actually? Yeah, by all means. Fine. We'll go back to the agenda item, which is agenda item 6, caravan sites fit and proper person fees policy. Head of Service Environment Services, Licensing and Community Safety is not with us this evening, but Richard Hyland is here to present this report. Over to you, Richard, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, this report refers to the caravan sites fit and proper person fees policy 2021. The council licenses caravan sites, which will be defined as holiday use, permanent residential or touring sites. We have approximately 110 such sites in Rother, but this report just relates to the residential sites, for which there are 4 with around 130 units. New regulations commenced on the 1st of July 2021, requiring managers of mobile home parks to be fit and proper persons, and for the council to maintain a register of such persons. The government has produced guidance to be followed in determining whether a person is fit and proper, and this includes providing a disclosure and barring service check. A site owner under the Mobile Homes Regulations 2020 must apply to the local authority for the appointed manager to be added to the register. The regulations do permit the local authority to determine a fee for an application for someone to be added to such register. An application fee and an annual fee can be set. Fees do not apply to the holiday sites or for non-permanent residential sites, and charges are limited to recovering the costs of exercising the fit and proper person test function only. Item 6 refers to our existing annual fees, which the sites currently pay. The council believes that fit and proper person assessment checks will take approximately 120 to 150 minutes per application. So on this basis, the initial application fee is set at £70. And number 8 then refers to a scale for fees to raise on the size of the site, and it's 50 pence per unit. If the council has to appoint an individual to manage the site, a fee of £100 will be incurred, but I don't envisage this ever happening. If an application is not included on the register and is not approved, the fee will not be refunded. It is recommended that the council approves the caravan sites fit and proper persons fees policy 2021.
Thank you for that report, Richard, making it quite clear and succinct exactly what we are reviewing there this evening. Are there any questions from any cabinet members tonight before I invite Councillor Field to lead person on this to make some comments, please?
Sorry, yes, thank you. I'm very happy to propose we do this, but I would just like to comment in relation to the tick box grid at the end, that I believe whenever we are dealing with a person or licensing anybody, we need to have regard to the environmental aspects of their work, and B, I really do think that our equalities and diversity policy also ought to apply in this case. We can't be seen not to be taking notice of that when we appoint people or license people, I think it's very important. But having said that, I'm happy to propose this.
Thank you very much indeed. If I've got someone to second that.
Yeah, happy to second, Councillor Tempe. Thank
Thank
you.
you. And if we can vote on that item as per the report, thank you very much. All those in favour, that's unanimous, and thank you very much indeed. Are you going to go home and enjoy the evening, Richard? Thank you. Okay, if we will move into agenda item 7, potential appeal costs, strategy and planning. This is in particular of 2 applications, one in Burwash and one at Fairlight Cove. It's the report of Tim Hickling, Head of Service, Strategy and Planning. Tim, I'll leave it with you to introduce the purpose of the report and follow through thereafter, please.
Okay, thank you, Chairman. So, as the Chairman's pointed out, this report relates to 2 planning applications at Strand Meadow in Burwash and Pet Level Road in Fairlight. Both applications were recommended by officers for approval and refused by Planning Committee earlier this year. Details of each application are contained at paragraph 2 of the report. Both applicants have now lodged an appeal against the Council's decision to the Planning Inspectorate by way of written reps. There's also a cost claim submitted against the Council at Strand Meadow, and we understand a similar claim is likely to be submitted for Fairlight. The written reps appeal procedure involves the exchange of written statements, and as part of the Council's case, all third-party letters of objection will be sent to the Inspectorate in support of the Council's position. Third parties can submit further information directly to the Inspectorate, particularly if it adds value to their original submissions. The Inspectorate can ask the Council for its views on the method of the appeal, and it is therefore recommended that the Council accepts the written reps format for both cases. However, it is worth stating that the final decision will be made by the Planning Inspectorate and not the Council. The Inspectorate will then appoint an appropriately qualified inspector to conduct each appeal. To defend the Council's position in both cases through written reps, your officers would require some external expertise to robustly defend the reasons for refusal. The associated costs to do so are set out in paragraph 5 of the report, i.e. up to £50,000 plus a contingency of a further £50,000 in the unlikely event of awarded costs against the Council. Finally, if the Council considers that written reps is not an appropriate method for the Inspector to consider the appeal, paragraphs 6 and 7 of the report set out the suggested costs dealing with the appeals either through a hearing or a public inquiry. Therefore, if the appeals proceed by either of these formats, it is recommended that up to £150,000 per appeal is set aside from reserves. This would be to cover both the Council's costs and the appellant's costs if there is a successful award of costs against the Council. Thank you. Happy to take
Thank you. Before I invite Councillor Jonathan Bryan Hall, Councillor Dixon, did you want to make a comment at this stage?
The only comment I'd like to make is that democratically elected councillors can make decisions which might not agree with officers, and that is the price of democracy. And sometimes that will happen, and we do have to be prepared for that. And we must be careful that we don't just always have to agree with officers, because it might cost us money. Democracy is much more important than that, and there is a price sometimes to pay.
If I can invite Councillor Sue Project, please.
Thank you. That's interesting. Well, that was a good point that Councillor Dixon has made. I think the thing about these 2 applications, particularly the first one, in the light of our recent AONB training, we should actually win that one. And because it was on AONB issues that we decided to turn it down. The second one, and I'm sure Councillor Bryan Hall will comment on it, but the second one is also one that I don't know what will happen in terms of what the inspector's decision would be, but actually it is a wrong site in many ways. And I think what this council has to do, what members have to do, is make the right decisions. And yes, there are parameters, and yes, there are guidelines, and yes, there are rules that we have to follow in planning. But we have to make the right decision for our residents.
Thank you for those comments. Yes, Councillor John Barnes.
Chairman, I'm the local member here for the Strand Meadow site. And I think this is a particularly important case because what has happened is that this has already gone to appeal once and in fact was turned down by the inspector. And what we have is a very small variation in order to enable him to come back to us. And I suspect he will come back to us with yet another one, and there will be a further appeal on that. I've been trying to persuade the inspectorate to wait for the outcome of the current situation, but unfortunately they have reserved their right to go ahead. That's going to cost everybody money, but I think we have a moral duty to actually tackle this one because it is a site that is obtrusive on the Rother Valley and hence a very important part of the area of outstanding natural beauty. More than that, this is a historic landscape. It's quite unique in this country as far as I'm concerned, and being a 14th century landscape. And that in itself gives it intrinsic value over and above its beauty. And the case law in recent cases has tended to actually say no longer does the tilted balance apply, you have to strike a balance. And here you have to prove considerable advantage to offset the irreparable damage to the AMB. I hope very much we fight this one tooth and nail.
Thank you for those comments. And I think that a lot of those were echoed in the presentation that we had on the AONB recently, which I think really did make a case for protecting these parts of Rother. If I can invite Councillor Jonathan Vinehall as lead member, please.
Thank you, Councillor Oliver. Yes, so we don't want to turn it into a planning committee discussion. I'll try not to. The Strand Meadow is a problematic site. It had already been to an appeal, and the applicant lost that appeal. And the plan that was brought forward in terms of the size and mass and the impact, the urban impact on the edge, had not really changed. And I was rather surprised that the officer's report didn't refer to the inspector's appeal because that was refused on the same. The planning committee refused it effectively on the same grounds, and rightly so too, because that bar is a high bar to jump over. You don't just ignore an inspector's report. So, however, having said that, it's a single issue, really. It is a single issue with a clear precedent, and on that basis, what I was going to propose, and I have spoken to Councillor Barnes about this as well, is that we deal with that one by written representation because it is a single issue and it should be dealt with. But what I would like to propose is that the submission before it goes to PINS, and I'm assuming that PINS wants to deal with it in that way, but we propose to PINS that it's dealt with as a written representation, that Councillor Barnes agrees the submission, the representation before it goes to PINS. And I think that's a good thing because firstly, as I said, the officer's report didn't cover off what was really in the committee's mind a key area, and Councillor Barnes was the proposer of that too, and is very much representing his ward as well as his experience on the planning committee. On the second item, which is Fairlight Cove, is a slightly trickier one because that land was allocated, and I sort of get the impression that the examiner probably doesn't go and visit every site, and if he did, he probably would have realised that if you lived in the corner of that site, you were 50 metres or so away from the village hall, which was great in terms of sustainability, but you had to walk about 1.2 kilometres to get there, crossing a very busy road twice. And in all my experience and exposure to sustainable development, that does not come under it. In addition to that, there was also the issue of the doctor's surgery on that site, which hadn't been formally dealt with. And so that is an issue as well. It is more complicated because it was an allocation in the DASA, and so an examiner has effectively agreed that site, may not have seen it, but he agreed it. That's a high bar to jump over, but it's not the final bar. And that's the most important thing. And where we have an issue that's come along in that DASA, we have to address it for the right reasons, because putting wrong houses in the wrong places, that would just be an isolated development village. So it's a little more complicated, and on that basis, I would recommend that we propose to the inspectorate, we address that by hearing. It's not so complicated, it needs to be dealt with by public inquiry. It doesn't have really heavy technical issues. It's one of judgment on sustainability. So that is what I'm proposing for those two appeals.
Thank you for those comments, John. Tim, is there any comment you'd like to make as to what's being proposed?
Without wanting, I don't want to stray into the planning merit of it, because the report's purely about the cost. But obviously, the cost to the council rises if you go to a hearing or public inquiry, and obviously that's a cabinet decision. So,
thank you for that. Is there any need to adjust the wording on this?
Well, the current proposal is for the current proposal is that written representations for defending these. So it should be changed to a written representation for the Strand Meadow being proposed with the representation agreed with Councillor Barnes before it's submitted. And on the second one, that a hearing be proposed for the Fairlight Cove.
Thank you. Have we got that okay, Lisa?
Happy with that?
Yeah. We're going to second that. All those in favour of that amendment to this particular report, please. All those in favour? Thank you very much indeed. And that's unanimous. Thank you very much for that. Thank you very much, Tim. Are you going to leave us now, Tim? Are you going to leave us now? Yes. Yes, by all means, please do. Okay. If we can now move on to item 8, which is the recommendations of the Anti-Poverty Task and Finish Group. This is a report from Head of Service, Housing and Community, Joe Powell. And it's the work that's been put in by this particular group under the chair of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee. And it's nice to see you here tonight, Councillor Sam Coleman, because I know that you were chairing this, and you've put in an exceptional amount of work in bringing this together. And I think that should be acknowledged. And thank you very much indeed. If I can invite Joe Powell to put forward this report. Joe, and then I perhaps invite Councillor Paul Osborne if he wanted to make any comments before we invite any other comments this evening. Thank you, Joe.
Thank you, Chair. Just to say, unfortunately, Claire Cordell, the CEO of Rother Voluntary Action RVA, was due to join us tonight because she's been instrumental in co-chairing this with us, these events with us, and feeding into them. Unfortunately, she had a personal reason for not being able to come, so just to put that to you. Just to remind members, in January 2020, the Overview and Scrutiny Committee approved the formation of the Anti-Poverty Task and Finish Group, and Sam, Councillor Coleman, excuse me, was able to chair that. We held 2 events in the back end of 2020, so the first was in November 2020, and we invited external partner agencies and services to join us in a sort of discussion on services available locally, describing the main challenges that those services were experiencing locally, and just getting a feel for what the main challenges before us are. The second event was an internal focus on the Housing Needs Service, Revenue and Benefits Service, and Environmental Health Service. Again, looking at what our main challenges are as services internally to the council, and also challenges such as accessibility to those services and how we prioritise most vulnerable. There was also a presentation from our to members on the council tax reduction scheme, which was delivered by a technical consultant in April 2021, and it summarised the main features of our council tax reduction scheme and where those sit compared to other local authorities nationally. So the evidence gathering sessions were really positive, I think, and reassuring evidence was gathered that there's a lot of good work going on locally, effective work as well. But unfortunately, we also did establish that there are areas for improvement. There are plenty of evidence to suggest that there are a large number of people routinely being forced to choose between heating their homes, feeding themselves and clothing their families adequately. And there are a lot of challenges before us. The two events also underline to members, I think, the complexity of the causes of poverty, and that as local authorities, we're charged principally with dealing with the symptoms and trying to alleviate the symptoms of poverty. And the fact that these factors that are spread across government, across health, housing, education, employment, and criminal justice systems, and it's a significant challenge across all those areas in different ways. The challenges are summarised for you at point 13 of the report, and fall into three main areas, which I'll briefly summarise. One is service coordination at both a strategic commissioning level and at an operational service delivery level. There was evidence of perhaps room for improvement in how those are coordinated, where those are coordinated in existing structures. There was also a second area which broadly around service accessibility, and particularly that access to the internet is imperfect, particularly for rural areas, and many vulnerable groups don't use the internet or don't use it routinely. And that service locations, physical locations, are often not located are distant from one another and not necessarily located in one central location, or indeed within rural satellite locations. And the promotion of services, there is a challenge amongst service providers who don't seem to be aware of the great resources that are out there telling us what services exist and what can be done to access those. And also that there's a real challenge in terms of the literacy levels of the most vulnerable. The average reading age nationally is 9 years old, and that was I think, you know, something for everyone to digest when we're promoting our services in using leaflets and websites and letters, and the extent to which people, the average reading age of the nation being 9, of course, if we look at our own service users and more vulnerable groups, the levels of educational attainment will be lower in that group. Solutions are summarised at point 15 of the report, very loosely. Hubs, we need our services to be in the same place. We need those services to be accessible to people in different parts of a large district geographically. We need to make every contact with people count. We need our professionals to know what services are out there so that they can deal with symptoms as they find them in one go, rather than multiple services necessarily needing to be engaged. And that is an existing principle that we need to piggyback. And the role of the local strategic partnership, and it's struck the group as being the perfect vehicle for developing and delivering an anti-poverty strategy. Just to summarise the findings of the council tax reduction scheme for you as well, the recommendations you'll find in the report, just briefly summarising those, that the donations and promotion, that the current council tax reductions hardship fund could be reviewed and better ways of promoting that in the community be developed. And in addition, that donations page of a sort of opportunity for philanthropy could be considered. Consider increasing the maximum support when the council achieves its financial stability ambitions. So we can potentially review the level of support provided through the council tax hardship fund, but perhaps once our own finances are in order, essentially. And the Cabinet be requested to consult with key stakeholders on the council tax reduction scheme for self-employed people and those self-employed residents who are registered disabled. So the recommendations, I hope, speak for themselves, and happy to take questions. And I know Councillor Coleman will also be happy to pitch in, I'm sure, on the report.
Thank you very much. And that Joe. Councillor Paul Osborne, is there any comment you want to make, Paul, being it's your...
I'd just be brief, Chairman. I think Joe's covered most of it off, and basically Councillor Coleman and his group have done an excellent job and come up with the recommendations as printed. So I think the best thing we can do is support that. One thing that did come out was with Councillor Coleman's position as council spokesman on this sort of subject, it was also decided that if he will be keeping an eye on things, and if need be, we can reconvene the task and finish group with the existing members just to make life easy, so they're all sort of up to speed straight away.
Thank you very much indeed. Yeah, for me, in actually reading all of this, and I know the work that's gone in, it just seemed that it was all out there somewhere, floating around, and this has been able to bring it together. So, it's an excellent piece of work, which I think had a real desire and commitment from those members who are on the task group, supported, by the excellent officers that, again, were able to feed into it all. Before I invite Councillor Terry Byrne, any other member would like to make a comment? Councillor Kevin Dixon, please.
Thank you, Chairman. And Councillor Osborne's partially answered the question that I'm just about to ask. I think when we've done task and finish groups before, we've been guilty of doing the task and finish. I know it says task and finish group, and the idea is you finish, but I think we do need some sort of monitor at some point down the road to see how we're going, where we've been, and what else needs to be done. So maybe I could request Paul at his next OSC meeting actually put something on the agenda for maybe 12 months, 18 months hence, where you actually do formally review what's gone on, what we've done, and where we can go with it. I know I chaired a tourism working group in the last council. Clearly, we've not been able to review that because of what's gone on. There hasn't been any tourism. But at some point in the future, I would still like that to be reviewed. So I think we need to revisit what we do to make sure we do what we say we're going to do, and continue and see what else can be done. And this excellent piece of work that's been done shouldn't be lost.
Yeah, and it shouldn't be put on the shelf to gather dust. I think that's the point that I think we need to make. We've done an awful lot of good work on it, and we should continue to use that as a point of reference to take it forward. Councillor Catherine Field?
Yes, thank you. I think my question really is aimed at Councillor Coleman, but we know that so much of what we need to do in life requires on us being able to read the instructions and to read, well, just read, full stop. We also know that a great many people who can't read are embarrassed about this and ashamed and don't tell us, and find ways of coping so it doesn't show, but actually they're not reading and they're not understanding. The average reading age of 9 hides an awful lot of very, very poor reading and illiteracy, because clearly there are an awful lot of people who have very advanced reading ages to be taken into that equation. So my question for Councillor Coleman is, did you have any ideas of how we might go about addressing this problem?
Thank you, Chair. And I'll speak, as I was going to speak anyway afterwards as well. Yeah, I think it's a real issue, and I think I've had casework personally where residents have come to me and said that they've tried to claim one thing or another and it's not worked out. And when I've sort of inquired, it's sort of been, well, they got given the form to fill in and they never filled it in. And usually when you dig down into it, they look at this form with these words on that they don't really understand, they can't read. There's a lot of embarrassment and a lot of shame as well when it comes to things like literacy. But I think what the strategy and what this report highlights is that need for collaborative working with outside organisations. There are organisations out there that deal with sort of adult literacy and raising the reading age of our population, especially those in poorer areas. I know Bexhill College do some work around that with their adult learning classes in the evenings. And I think it's just going to be a case of working with RVA, working with the local strategic partnership to try and encourage those schemes, get those schemes to the people that need them most of all, I think.
Thank you, sir. Catherine?
If I could come back, I think my question really was a bit more basic than that. How do you get these people to overcome the barrier and actually participate?
Please, sir. Yeah.
I'll pass over to Joe on that.
Yeah, I was happy to jump in. I mean, it's a very complex question. I mean, what we end up, and what is proven to be successful is to try and develop services that are catered to the needs of individual people. So try and reach people where we know they are. So, for example, food banks, job centres, and other locations in order to make our, not try and, the most ancient form of communication we have is talking to each other, isn't it? And being in front of people. And thankfully, most of our client groups can engage in that sort of outreach model, which is where the hub idea is so effective. Is that once people, and we already have hubs. This is not a new idea. The Pelham is a hub. This building is a hub of sorts, and so are myriad parish councils around the district. It's just about trying to harness those existing community hubs and community where these, as I say, the more vulnerable and we know our most vulnerable applicants locate themselves anyway. Trying to find a neat fit with that and be out there with them in those locations face to face.
Thank you, Joe. And with RVA, there's an awful lot of energy within RVA and an awful lot of specialised skill. And I think that working with these agencies is so important. Councillor Sue Projak and then Councillor Christine.
Thank you. Thank you, and just echoing what a good piece of work this is. And thank you to Sam for leading it and Joe, the officer, for supporting it so well and so vigorously, I think. I was sat in on some of the meetings and really impressed with the information gathering there. The one thing that comes over very clearly is that there is help out there, but it's fragmented, people don't know about it, and there's a huge amount of organisations and maybe duplication as well. So I think I do very, very much support hubs. I can remember when we set up years ago the Battle Help and Advice Centre, and if you sat in the Help and Advice Centre, the range of issues that people brought in, from wanting, bus timetables to I haven't got any money left. So hubs are really good if we can make them multi-purpose hubs, so people don't feel embarrassed or people feel comfortable going in them for whatever reason. It's interesting about the diversity of needs. There was a good piece of work I passed on to Sam about the Rye Food Bank, and it's such an indictment, and it's not just COVID, it's such an indictment that we have to rely on food banks. They've doubled and trebled, and the Rye Food Bank in particular. And a piece of work was done by the Rye Food Bank manager, and he asked people what else they needed on top of their food parcel. And there were 11 different things they needed. And Hark, I think, sat in the food bank as a signposting agency for these people. So Joe's absolutely right that we've got to find them where they are. If they won't come to us, we've got to find them where they are. Customer services are also mentioned, that there's a huge amount of information they need to have. I don't know how customer services store their things in their heads anyway. There's such a lot of information they need. And so we must support them doing that. And just to mention, we're just embarking on a review of customer services, bringing in an independent not-for-profit organisation in the Institute of Customer Services. So I'm sure Sam will be part of that review as well. So the other thing that I'm really pleased about to see is that it's going to sit with the local strategic partnership once the action plan is done, because that seems to be a really ideal place, because that's where all the agencies meet together, and it's such a useful meeting, and it seems obvious that this strategy sits there. So thank you again for this report, because it's just a wonderful starting point for the action plan.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Christy Davies.
Yes, thank you very much. And I'd like to commend Councillor Coleman's work on this. I think it's and Mr. Powell's work. It's been a really, really good exploration of the issues. I've just got a few points to make, some of which are sort of local and some of which relate to my cabinet role. I mean, for me, locally in Central Ward, one of the major causes of poverty is the difference between the rents that are charged and the local housing local housing allowance. And that means even if you're in low paid work, often you might get top up benefits, but you're having to use those top up benefits to pay rent, because it is just so out of kilter with the sort of local circumstances. So some work, I think, about how this council can lobby and work with maybe our Member of Parliament in order to get, that some of those issues addressed and brought out into the open, so that we can, maybe push to have a different reference area for local housing allowance. So that would be one of the things that I would want to particularly raise. On this, your recommendation number 2, can we include councillors in that review of the hardship fund? I know that I've helped local residents in Central Ward apply for hardship funding, and they've not been successful. And it seems to me that the hardship fund is the sort of such sort of hard end, if you like, that people almost have to be in debt and really on the verge of being evicted or whatever before they get the hardship funding. Whereas perhaps if we sort of step back a bit and could apply the hardship funding a bit sooner in the process, in that journey of that individual, that would be really helpful. So if it's possible to include councillors in that review, I would urge that. And finally, just to say, if we adopt our corporate plan, which I think is coming up in a little while, we're talking about on economic development, we're talking about encouraging the development of quality employment opportunities in the district. It's a really, really big issue for me. It's something that I'm working very closely with our team locally to make sure that where we encouraging jobs, new businesses into the area. For example, the new hotel at Coodon Beach, or the new owners of Coodon Beach, who are going to invest and bring it up sort of like world-class standards. That will provide better, that will provide jobs that are well paid within the tourism industry. I mean, it's interesting that Councillor Prochak talked about Rye Food Bank, and I've heard the same story about Rye Food Bank, that actually the number of claimants is far exceeds the increase in Rye Food Bank take up through the pandemic far exceeds what actually Bexhill's Food Bank. I mean, that's gone up quite significantly, but Rye is like got the biggest increase in demand, and of course that's because the area relies so much on tourism, and lots of people have been made redundant or furloughed, and when you're on a basic salary and then you go down onto 80%, and there's some real hard decision those families have to make. So I would say yes, the great piece of work. A couple of things I'd really like you to look at is around housing benefit levels, around how we do the hardship fund, and again, please support the corporate plan, because that is, that can deliver some of the answers to a lot of these issues. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that, Joe. Taking that particular point on the hardship fund, which is reviewed by officers, can members represent the applicant in any way or be party to that?
In terms of the individual hardship applications,
yes.
I think I'll defer to Robin because it's his service. I don't want to do that out of turn, but I can't see any reason why a testimonial to officers.
I think the first part is to get the policy right, isn't it? Update the policy, and I think Councillor Bayes was asking for inclusion in that process in terms of setting out the policy. Generally, we do operate a number of these sort of types of things, including discretionary housing payments for housing benefit, for example. I wouldn't want to slow the process down by including members in that kind of process, but you can clearly be there to support your resident in their application. I'll take that away in terms of the process, but I think the important bit is getting the criteria right in the first place and making sure people can access it properly and easily and quickly.
Johnny, okay, thanks for that clarity, Robin, and I'm sure that's something which Christine will move forward with you. Sam, do you want to come in now, please?
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I finally get a chance to sort of say thank you to Joe, to Robin, to everyone that's helped in this. Claire Cordell from RVA. It's been a real sort of fundamental bit of work. I mean, for people on low incomes, they've had nearly 10 years of austerity, job stagnation, a lack of job security, LHA rates that aren't in step with the price of rents, and then they've had a pandemic. And so for a lot of people, however hard they work, however hard they try, their situation just gets worse and worse and worse. And so I think work like this is really important to make sure we're doing what we can, because essentially a lot of this stuff used to be done by local authorities. And then as councils cut budgets, it's sort of a lot of stuff got transferred to charities and private organizations. And as a result, it got fragmented. And that's what this report shows quite clearly, I think, is there are a lot of groups doing a lot of really good things, but because they've had to build up from scratch and find their own way, and they've not all had that central connection, it's really lacking that sort of hub, if you like. To take one example, sort of further answering Councillor Field's question, Sidley House in my ward, a Sure Start centre, community centre. Once upon a time, you could take your child to the nursery there, and then also have a chat to someone from East Sussex about housing services, about benefits, about whatever. And it was that hub system where that one communication approach where you go and all of your needs are dealt with. You're not having to search for a form for one thing and then a form for another thing and then the online form for another thing and then going to a certain place to do another thing and finding the organisation that you can ring up to do it. You could go and you would get all of the help you need. And I think the sooner we get back to something like that, the better. And I just wanted to finally be cheeky and wish everyone here and everyone at home a happy Pride Month. I was really happy to see the Pride flag flying outside next to the Union Jack. So happy Pride Month, everybody. Thank you.
Well done, Sam. And thanks everyone for the comments here. And it has been an exceptional piece of work, and I think it's a really good base document to be working with. Terry, this falls within your lead, so perhaps you can just sort of sum up on this and move the
Thank you.
report.
Thank you, Doug. Before I summarise, I've got one answer really to Councillor Field's problem with literacy. Later on in this agenda, we're going to look at a discretionary disabled facilities grant. Now, I think not being able to read can quite reasonably be seen as a disability, same as visual impairment. And technology is available now to make access to previously written material far easier for those who can't read and for those who can't see. So just as a point, I will certainly be looking, when we look at the discretionary disabled facilities grant, to see what areas we can actually use a bit of technology to make things more accessible. It's not all about ramps and wheelchairs. It should cover the whole of the disabled spectrum. So that's just a particular comment there. Everybody's congratulated Sam, and it would be churlish of me not to. When we first set up an anti-poverty task and finish group, I think it would have been easy for everyone to just throw up their hands and say, oh my God, we've not got any funding, everybody's poor, isn't it dreadful? But no, the group took a forensic look at what was available. And the big thing that comes out of this is joining up the dots. They've identified the voluntary services, identified the council services, and most importantly, identified gaps that need filling and can be filled by one part of the service talking to another. So I think that was very, very important. And in the way that everyone's been saying what a great piece of work it was, if you read recommendation 1, it specifically says, we're going to capture this work and turn it into a strategy, an ongoing strategy. So whether we actually need to reconvene the task and finish group in some form or not, I don't know. But if we have a strategy, then we can review progress against that strategy, because if that strategy is properly written, it will have metrics, it will have measurements. How good are we how good are we at achieving what this task and finish group have said we need to achieve. So I think recommendation 1 says it all there. We're not going to lose this work. It's a starting point. And again, congratulations to Councillor Coleman for establishing such a comprehensive starting point when it could have just been political statements about, oh, we're all poor. No, this has got a real way forward to make things better for the less able. If you look at recommendations 2, 3, and 4, they're nearly all around council tax. We've already looked at the fact that if we have more money, we try and do things. And one of the things we're looking at is maybe a way of the more well-off in society contributing to a hardship fund, which would ease the pressure on it. And it's in there looking at ways in which that could be done. So I think recommendation 1 says it all. We want an ongoing strategy built on the wonderful work of this group, and recommendations 2, 3, and 4 all address this burden of council tax. How do we ease that burden on some of our less affluent, let's not say less affluent, our poor residents, and how do we do something about it? So I'm very happy to move the recommendations as printed.
Thank you very much indeed. And those in favour? Thank you very much, and that's unanimous. And thank you again for all the work that's gone in on that particular project. We move on, if we may, to the agenda item 9, financial assistance policy, disabled facilities grants. This again, I believe, Joe, is a report that you've brought forward as head of service, housing and community. The purpose of the report is there. I'll let you lead in, please.
Thank you, Chair. The council must have an adopted financial assistance policy to be able to provide disabled facilities grants, which I hope most members are familiar with. Just for reminding that DFGs or disabled facilities grants are included in the financial assistance policy and are provided to provide adaptations to people's homes to enable disabled people to remain in their homes. It's also proposed within the report that a discretionary disabled project grant be introduced as part of the policy to enable the council to spend its full complement of funding, and that the needs of the community can be met. The use of the council's annual DFG allocation, disabled facilities grant allocation, will remain prioritised throughout to meet the statutory needs of individual people, with a ring-fenced cap of 200,000 being set aside to be considered for community groups to make adaptations to public buildings, open spaces, etc., to encourage access. Members may be aware of an historical underspend in this budget, in the disabled facilities grant budget, where essentially for different reasons, for many reasons, the council's unable to spend its full complement of grants, which is a common problem across the country, and in East Sussex, where Rother is the best performing authority at getting the grant spent that it can. So again, to summarise, the sorts of adaptation that can be considered would include ramping wheelchair access to external approaches, communal area entrances, stair lifts, accessible play areas, sanitary facilities for disabled wheelchair users, and toilets, etc. The criteria for the panel which will decide these applications is similar to the community grant scheme that members will be familiar with, and is detailed in a bit more at point 15 and appendix 2 of the report as well. So it's recommended that the council adopt the revised financial assistance policy, and I'm happy to take questions on the disabled mandatory side of the revised policy, which is largely unchanged and working well, and this new element, which is the discretionary disabled project grant. Thank you.
Thank you very much for that report, Joe. Are there any questions on the report, or are there any comments need to be made? Councillor Projer.
Just a quick question. It's sort of related and sparked off by Councillor Burns' thought. Is that some time ago, we had an application on Rural Rother Trust, and Councillor Field may remember it, is for a shed basically, because there was a family with an autistic son, and they needed a place for this chap to go and have meltdowns and get away from the family. Would that kind of thing be eligible, or does it fall outside the criteria?
Perhaps Joe could give us some sort of gut steer on that, Joe.
Yeah, I mean, that would probably fall outside the criteria, because that would be for an individual household or family, for which the disabled facilities grants can be considered. And there is a discretionary element to the mandatory disabled facilities grants, which is for individuals. So especially when children are concerned, there are flexible approaches. So we would encourage that route to be explored in the first instance. But just to remind members that the project grant, the discretionary disabled project grant, is targeted at community groups and, for example, church hall, public spaces, that sort of thing.
Thanks for that clarity on that. Councillor Kevin Dixon.
Further clarity then, from what you just said, would that include town and parish councils could apply for this money?
It's certainly something to be considered, and it's important to mention in the appendices, it mentions that the ward councillors would need to support any relative, any application. So it's certainly something that can be considered.
Any other comments? No. Terry, if I can, I think you're going to propose
Thank
this.
you. Thank.
Oh, I beg your pardon. I just you sort of blended into the background there. By all means, Paul.
Thank you. And yeah, I thought this did obviously come via scrutiny, and basically we thought it was a good idea. So I thought it'd be worth mentioning. So just to say this is good. So So
forgive me for not acknowledging that.
Can I quickly ask how are we going to get the information about this out to our public?
On a communication basis, yeah, indeed so. Joe, the plan going forward?
Yeah, we'll be developing a project plan for the rollout, and which will include a communications plan. But the usual channels will be adopted, through promotion to the general public through the website, etc. But I also think it's probably prudent for some targeted promotion to relevant groups, potential applicants. But we do need to monitor the demand for this sort of service, because at the moment it isn't being delivered through existing resources. So we are sort of, seeing how it goes.
Yeah, we don't want to keep these best kept secrets a secret. Jonathan.
So just following up on Councillor Dixon's point, to be a little more specific. So would a parish council apply for some grant towards improving disabled access to sports facility, building or similar? They might, village hall or something. No.
I'm reluctant to say anything certain at this point. The principle of it seems sound to me, and it would be definitely something that was considered by the panel, I'm sure. But I would probably need to double check the detail of any application to make sure that there was.
It's within the remit somewhere potentially.
It's a scope. It's certainly the idea is the scope of it.
Okay. Terry, have you moved this? I'm sort of lost a little bit.
Yes, please.
You have moved it.
Delighted to move. Oh, Councillor, would you like that?
I was just seconding.
Okay, well, what I would say, we've already seen that this is going to generate a lot of imaginative thinking. We've had questions already. Will it apply to this? Will it apply to that? What I'd like to do is commend not only cabinet members, but ward members and members of voluntary organisations to read this in some detail, because as Joe Powell says, individual applications are almost going to tailor the way in which this gets applied. This is a new grant. We have one set of criteria so far. I'm sure they're not set in concrete. When is a public facility a private facility, and vice versa? Like a sports club, do you have to be a member, or is it an open pitch on which people can play? All that sort of thing, well, that'll come out as these applications come in. But that won't happen unless everybody, as I say, reads the paper in detail and applies some really creative thought on how we could make Rother more disabled friendly. And as I said in my previous comment, disability is not just mobility. We've got visual impairment, you've got inability to read. With autistic children, I'm sure if you had a school with a degree with a number of autistic children, if no facility could be provided out of any other grant educationally, then perhaps a quiet space or a chill out space for public access might be possible. But we'll have to see how this grant works out. But so far, I'm just very happy to move in principle this discretionary disabled facilities grant.
Thank you very much, Terry. And Councillor Timpey is second.
I've seconded it, yes,
and
thank you.
if we can vote on that, I think that's pretty unanimous. I think it's a good piece of work, and thank you very much indeed, Joe, for bringing the clarity on that. Right, where are we? Agenda item 10. Protecting discretionary services strategy. This is a report from Robin, Assistant Director Resources. Will identify the purpose of the report, which I know has been worked along with Councillor Kevin Dixon and other members of Cabinet. Robin, over to you, please.
Thank you, Chairman. Just a quick intro. The strategy has really been developed on the back of our financial stability work and also fits in with our medium-term financial plan as well. And it seeks to secure the future of those community assets that we currently own and supports the need for the council to become more predominantly strategic or regulatory in its role. So ultimately, the idea is that we can continue to deliver our own services within a balanced budget going forward. And as I say, that comes back to our financial stability plan. The report itself sets out the assets and the services that we would like to see owned and delivered, if you like, through our most local level, through our town and parish councils and any other publicly focused organisation that might be interested in operating these assets. The strategy sets out the basis for the engagement with anyone who's interested in taking over these things and how we resource this both internally for ourselves in terms of our resourcing of this work, but also how we might support the transfer to those other organisations as well. What we were hoping to do is, apologies, I've lost track of what I was saying, but I'm happy to answer any questions that members have.
So this is not a new piece of work. This is something that's been going on presumably for quite a number of years, where we've had to identify how we deal with moving forward and making sure that these various statutory bodies and other groups are taking ownership of some of these continued services. Kevin, is there any questions of Robin? If not, I'll invite Kevin to contribute at this stage.
Thank you, Chairman. Just to follow on from what Robin says, this report sets out a framework to discuss the future of discretionary services. And it's not all about devolution. I think it's important to say that early on. We've obviously, the nature of what discretionary services are is that things that we don't have to do if we don't want to. But of course, a lot of what those discretionary services are what you would expect an authority to do and what our residents expect us to do. And we've got to work out really three main things from our discretionary services. What we want to continue to do as an authority for the benefit of the residents, for them, for their district. What we can stop doing, if there is anything we can stop doing, it would obviously save us money if it's not required, and what we can get others to do instead of us, however we manage to do that. And our object is to reduce the day-to-day financial deficit to the council and our strain on reserves, which of course is our issue and what the Financial Stability Board is all about. We need to balance our books. So this may involve, investment as well, because we may wish to actually get our assets up to a decent standard before we give them to someone else. We may have to invest in our assets and be able to charge for them. So an example of keeping a service that we think is proper would be toilets at Camber Sands, for example. If we stop doing them, the public health situation at Camber would be not acceptable, and the residents of Camber would not find that acceptable. But of course, lots of people from outside the area use the toilets at Camber at basically our taxpayers' expense. So we should be looking at things like charging for use of the toilets at Camber and actually trying to make some income from an asset that we can then borrow money because we're getting an income as well. So there's lots of work to be done here, and we really need to be looking at all of these discretionary assets, discretionary services that we have, and deciding what we want to do. Yes, we will be working with partners, towns and parish councils, but I want to stress this isn't a take it over or lose it scenario. We really have got a very good relationship, thanks to the leader of the council and the deputy leader, along with the chief executive, who have been building a lot of bridges with towns and parishes, and we want to work with them now to see if this is the right way to go for some of our services. So it's all about agreement. It's not about forcing people to take things on. But ultimately, at the end of the day, we must save some money on our discretionary services, however we do that. So this is a framework approach. It's very much open for ideas, for people to come forward and say what we want to do. And equally, now that we are a totally strategic authority, the whole area is parished, we can try and take a much more strategic view on things and try and get the local people to do some of their services. So very much, Chairman, we're open now for ideas. Obviously, Robin and myself will start these discussions off and about how we go forward. But everyone's views are extremely welcome.
Thank you very much indeed, Kevin, for outlining it with, again, clarity. This is really step one, Robin. This is step one. This is actually alerting the fact that we need to be doing something about this. It's not going to be a draconian measures, but like a lot of local authorities have completely stopped doing it without any consultation, and they've closed toilets or they've closed various other amenities. This is all about doing it in consultation and working together. And this is part of the resetting in the wake up of where we are at this moment in time financially. Sue.
Thank you. And thank you, Councillor Dixon, for that introduction. And also the leader's emphasis that it's going to be done in consultation. The list, if you look on page 50, the list on paragraph 4, there's parks and open spaces, public conveniences, museum buildings, bus shelters, etc., etc. Just to point out that I think all the parishes, probably except maybe Rye, all the parishes pay for those things themselves. Under my portfolio, I have public conveniences, and work has already started across the council, and we really mean across the council, at looking at our toilets. And it's not a very easy look because nothing has been done to them apart from a bit of cleaning sometimes for years, and some of them are really in a quite awful state. And I remember when we used to go on the planning bus, it was Councillor Cortell always used to remark on the Rye toilets, and I believe the men's toilets in Rye are just really disgusting for a tourism hotspot. So I think it's the three questions that we've got in the report under paragraph 6 are key. Does the asset have strategic importance? Well, clearly the toilets in the middle of Rye do, and Battle, and probably in Bexhill, but not all Bexhill. And so carrying on with toilets, we've got to do something about it. If we're going to keep them, we've got to improve them because they are shameful, some of them. And as I mentioned in a conversation we had about toilets, my mother used to say, judge a place by its toilets. Well, I don't want Rother to be judged by its toilets. And so we might need to spend, but it's doing it in a rational way in consultation with the parishes and the town councils, and of course Bexhill Town Council now. So let's start this journey in a rational way. And you do remember at the bottom line though is that the toilets at the moment cost £400,000 a year to Rother, one of the highest spends. I mean, in my portfolio, I've got the next highest spend, which is waste and recycling. Thank you.
Any other comments?
Just as a point of order.
Yes, please.
I'm afraid the deputy leader is totally incorrect. The worst toilets are Devonshire Square, Bexhill, by a country mile.
All right. Yeah, Councillor Paul Cortell.
Thank you, Chair. And the Devonshire Square toilets are in my ward. And so thank you to Councillor Dixon for that. As an older person, I need to use toilets quite frequently. And I'm one of many, many older people in Bexhill who needs access to toilets. And without access to toilets, older people's ability to be able to have healthy walks will be reduced. And I think that the benefits of exercise, which will be, I understand, considered hopefully in an amendment to the corporate plan at some future date, are worth bearing in mind. Now, we're very, very fortunate, I think, that the Rother Alliance, as well as a minority of Conservative councillors, including two who are present now, listened to the public consultation and voted for a Bexhill Town Council, because that gives us a partner with whom we can have a dialogue about the future of toilets. And I am seriously concerned about the cost implications, but at the same time, I'm also concerned about ensuring that the older generation in Bexhill are able to relieve themselves when they need to.
Right, thank you for your comments. I think we've noted that. I think the recommendation is that we're looking to protect discretionary services. This is the start point. Councillor Dixon.
Thank you. And Councillor Courtell has prompted me to remind me to say something that I didn't, which was that this administration is not going to close toilets. And I think that is not our strategy here. We are looking to make sure that the services continue. And that is a very, very important point to get out. Many moons ago, this council did try and close a lot of toilets. I think it was in the early 2000s. And the outcry was phenomenal. And we reversed at that point. I wasn't on the council yet. The council reversed. And it is important to know that toilets are a necessity, that our public, our residents expect us to provide that. And that is important. So we expect someone to provide that. And that is what this work is about. And I don't want the message to get out that this is just an excuse to close toilets, because it's not.
No, I think the paragraph 6 says it's, safeguarding these areas, safeguarding these services, and making them transferable to whoever may wish to take them over in the most efficient way. So you're happy to move this, Kevin?
Yes, Chairman, as printed.
Thank you.
Second it.
Thank you, Jonathan. If we can vote, please, unanimous. And thank you very much indeed for bringing this, Robin, this report to us this evening, and the work that you've done with Kevin in making it really quite clear as to what the stage we've got to. If we can move into the next item, which is agenda item 11, which is the performance report fourth quarter. Recommendations have come forward from overview and scrutiny. So thank you again for being here tonight, Paul. If you want to make any comments shortly. Ben, are you going to give us some narrative on this, please?
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, as you say, the performance reports really only come to Cabinet when overview and scrutiny feel they have a recommendation to make, and I'm glad that Councillor Barnes is here as well, because this recommendation stems from his proposal. It was noted when overview and scrutiny were talking about the ability to deliver housing, and the overall figures set by government for inclusion in the local plan were not necessarily considerate of the geographical makeup of the area. And what overview and scrutiny would like is for Cabinet to make a resolution that officers go away and consider working with other local authorities who have 80% or higher level of protected land, which is the case with ourselves between AONB, SSSI and other types of land protections, to put forward a case to central government about a national abatement formula to calculate housing, for a national abatement formula to calculate housing targets. Basically, these aspects are not taken into consideration when judging our own housing targets, and it was felt that by overview of scrutiny committee that officers could look to work with other councils to develop up a potential case to government to make that argument.
Are there any further comments to be made? Councillor Sue Project. Sue.
Sorry to come in again, but waste and recycling, again, as I say, is in my portfolio. And I just wanted to flag up that the Environment Bill is heading our way. It should be on the statute books towards the end of the year. And if those recommendations survive, there's going to be a huge change in our waste and recycling. And we're even discussing whether it's worth having recycling targets, because they're going to be pretty meaningless. But it was interesting, the corporate plan responses, that a lot of people said our recycling targets weren't ambitious enough. But actually, if the bottle return scheme comes in, where you take your bottles back, what do we do about recycling in terms of the weight of bottles? We're going to have food waste collection, which is going to be a huge cost for every household. So I just wanted to flag that up, and it would be good, Councillor, if your scrutiny committee could pick up on some of these issues around the Environment Bill. Thank you.
Thank you, Sue, for those comments. Councillor John Barnes, would you like to make a comment at this stage, John?
Just very briefly, I hope very much you will take the recommendation forward to work with other authorities on this problem, because we have a supply problem of land which we're never going to resolve. You have 83% AONB, you have another 7 or 8% that are either wetlands or protected in some other way, and you've also got some floodplains. So the notion of a housing target for us, calculated on some national formula, really doesn't work. But we're not alone. There are 18 other such authorities in the southeast. And clearly, if we all shout together and we talk to our MPs, we might actually get somewhere on finding a way of delivering housing, but housing that we can actually deliver in the appropriate areas and not overcrowd those areas. Otherwise, we shall end up with the metropolis of Bexhill.
Thank you, John. Paul, Councillor Paul Osborne.
Thank you, Chairman. Yeah, I would just echo what Councillor Barnes has said there. You know, if you take an area of, say, 200 square miles and you can only actually build on, say, 10 square miles of it without upsetting some formula somewhere, then you're struggling to get the numbers. And it's something that sort of John brought up, so we thought we would support it, and hopefully you'll support it too. Couple of other bits. Sue mentioned the waste and recycling, but you know, I see on page 58 a green tick, a sea of red, but I see a green tick. Missed bins, all good. So we'd take something from it. Car parking come down, but equally Canberra, one car park was up by 59.1%. So don't close the toilets down there or do anything bad with them, because there's an awful lot of people go down there at the moment. When the sun shines, it's extremely busy. And if you read some of the comments I've had from residents in Canberra about what people do when they can't get in the toilets, it's not good. It's not good.
So too many vivid descriptions.
So I'll spare you that. But no, it's yeah. The targets, we looked at all the targets, and we sort of took the pragmatic view that things are not normal at the moment. And give it 3 months or 6 months, hopefully we get back to some element of normality, and we'll see some more green ticks and red crosses.
Thank you very much indeed. Councillor Terry Byrne. Terry?
Thank you, Doug. I'd just like to pick up on what Councillor Barnes, on the point Councillor Barnes was making. We don't want to come across as an authority that says, no, we don't want any building. It's easy to be a NIMBY, and I'd hate the public to get the impression that that's what we're doing. In fact, there are lots of small areas for building, small parcels of land, which are just right for building, but are of no commercial interest to the big building firms. And that's why we formed our own housing company of Alliance Homes Rother. Also, while we're supporting local community land trusts. Chief Executive Malcolm and myself went out recently to look at just such a scheme out at not Guestling, the next Icklesham. But so we're not being NIMBY about this. We really are trying to look at constructive ways of we obviously can't meet the government's target. That is almost impossible given the type of land we've got and where it is. But building the right houses in the right place, we really want to make inroads on that. So I just wanted to correct that impression that might have been given. I know Councillor Barnes is not really not in the NIMBY camp at all. He's more than supportive of building, but the right houses in the right place. But we've got to get together with the other local authorities and get those targets adjusted to something sensible.
Okay, thank you for your comments on that, Terry. If we can move this motion, Kevin.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes, I'm quite happy to support what Councillor Barnes says. I think a sensible approach. Whether officers can pull it off, of course, is another matter. But you don't find out anything if you don't try. So quite happy to move this printed.
Thank you. And second on that.
Before I second it, I will say that Councillor Prochak and I have been spending a lot of time with the officers trying to demonstrate other ways that we can deliver housing in the ONB using the High Wheel ONB unit, who have a lot of very positive thoughts and approaches on this, and we will continue to do that. And there'll be quite a few sort of sessions for members to listen to the progress of the plan and to be able to add their weight to it over the coming months. And I'll second that.
Very good. Thanks for that comment. And you'll second that. And if we can vote on this, thank you very much. As per the report, all those in favour? Thank you, Christine. Unanimous. Right. Moving on, it's the item 12, the corporate programme 2014-2021 update and closeout. Is this the one, Ben, that Cheryl was leading on this particular report? So thank you for joining us this evening, Cheryl. The purpose of the report to have an update on the progress and outcomes of the corporate programme of priority projects delivered to support achievement of the corporate plan 2014-2021. And I would just like to acknowledge all the work that you guys have put in, because there's been a phenomenal amount of work, and I know it's been very much supported by Jonathan Vinehall as key member on this. So over to you, please, Cheryl.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, thank you, everyone. So as Councillor Oliver said, the purpose of the report is to provide an update on the progress of the corporate programme that was set to achieve the corporate plan aims and outcomes 2014 to 21. There were 29 priority programmes and projects that were identified for delivery across 4 core aims. As individual projects were developed in more detail, they were brought before Cabinet as required for approvals and allocating resource and budget. However, the programme was centrally monitored by Programme Office to ensure a consistent and compliant approach, with updates being reported to Strategic Management Team in their role as Programme Board. Progress and achievements were reported annually to Overview and Scrutiny Committee, often accompanied by an audio visual to provide some key achievements. So hopefully those projects kind of leapt out of the page and into reality. As can be seen in the summary at Appendix A, 18 projects have been wholly completed and closeout reports agreed by Programme Board. Those closeout reports were compared with the original scopes that were set out in the original kind of 2014-15 year, and just really looked at for evaluating that the objectives were met, that the outputs were delivered, that the outcomes were being realised, and really learning some lessons and what went well, what didn't go so well, and constantly learning lessons and changing approaches throughout those 7 years to make improvements. 11 are still in progress. These are generally the major development schemes for housing and employment, whilst others that are still in progress have maybe taken a different direction as a consequence of the COVID-19 pandemic. And I think the report kind of covers a detail on every project status, whether it's still being in progress or whether it's completed, what the outcomes were, and it is therefore recommended to Cabinet to note the progress and outcomes of the 2014 to 21 corporate programme and that it be formally closed out in readiness for the new corporate programme 2020 to 27.
Thank you very much, Cheryl. This is a report just for noting, Lisa, am I right? There's no, don't take a vote on this. We do take a vote on this. Okay, fair enough. If there are, yes, Councillor John Barnes.
Sorry. Thank you, sir. In a sense, I'm speaking here on behalf of my group and not simply on behalf of myself, because one or two of these points would probably best come from a Bexhill member. But I really wanted to make a couple of points and then ask a question. One is a factual point. I think on page 84, there's a degree of optimism about the Marston's pub, which may actually be, I think, out of date. I get a sense that probably needs correction factually. I cannot forbear just to slightly stir by pointing out that now the swimming pool is out of action. Perhaps some consideration could be given to the leisure centre project again. But my question really is fundamental. There are a number of projects here. North East Bexhill is clearly one which hasn't gone quite as we'd hoped in terms of timing. And I think it would be right to ask, are you going to carry these forward into the new plan? Because they're not there in your current objectives, but they clearly remain powerful objectives. Not least because while you're going quite rightly, and I agree with Councillor Bayliss about this, you're going for quality of employment, but we do also need quantity of employment. And so carrying forward those objectives would actually serve a sustainable employment objective. Thank you very much, Chair.
Yeah, thank you, John. Perhaps I can invite Ben Hook to come back on those points.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. No, Councillor Barnes raises a very good point, and you know, in a sense, we've particularly with regards to the North East Bexhill areas in projects CA2 and CA2.01 and CA2.02. He's right. You know, development didn't come forward as quickly as we'd hoped. We had closed out the project on the basis that the planning permission had been given, that detailed planning had come forward for certain areas, and the point taken on the Marston's pub. But we are working with another local developer to try and bring forward an alternative on that site that would still include the delivery of the all-important hotel. And I know they're coming forward with a planning application in the near future, which obviously be then a decision for that committee. In regards to taking forward, we've obviously got the new corporate plan and programme coming up as the next item. Whilst specifically not mentioned, North East Bexhill does feature quite heavily in terms of some of the projects that are included in that, particularly the North East Bexhill Enterprise Park development, as well as the housing developments not mentioned by name, but things like Mount View Street, etc., are included in the corporate programme. So I hope that gives you some reassurance that on the next item, they are included in there, just not under the same headings and under a different guise, but the development up there remains a key important part of the corporate programme.
Thank you, Ben. Anybody else would like to make a yes, Councillor Sue project?
I just wanted to say, and thank you for all the work you've done on this. I just wanted to say about Blackfriars is that when it got planning permission, we were really blown away by the quality, the environmental aspects of it. And I keep rereading the report and I think, oh, they're going to put vegetable planters in the gardens. Oh, there's going to be an allotment. I just think we should shout about this more loudly and more regularly.
Here we are. There's a message to shout. And I would go along with that. I think this is something that we should be crowing about. Yeah, Kevin.
Thank you, Chairman. Two things, and I thank Councillor Barnes for his intervention and remind him that the corporate plan will come to full council, and his group, just like any of us, can actually add things at full council to the corporate plan. So maybe if there are things that you think that aren't here that we should be considering, then please talk to us in advance, let us know, and changes can be made. the corporate plan, after all, will be a living document. It can't be something that's just set in stone and not changed if there's things that need to be added. And moving on, paragraph 7, number 8, Canberra regeneration. Maybe just like Chairman to push the point that this is overdue. It does need doing. We've had some ideas. We know we need to squeeze a little bit more of the visitors' pound out of that for our own finances and see what we can do there. And it's really now getting a bit pressing that we try and get on with that. So maybe we'll bring that to the Financial Stability Board as well if it's not making any progress, because I think that is the one thing that we can make. We've talked about before. We can make some inroads into our financial deficits there.
Yeah, certainly Canberra is a captive market, and when you're getting 25,000 people arriving there, and very few of those are from our own district, we should be trying to squeeze their wallets as much as we're able to. Every other local authority does that. So I think that's something which I know that will be at the front end of our work programme in this particular area. Yes.
Just on that point, yes. I was reading an article about the Lake District and how visitor numbers have gone up so much there. They're actually, the local authorities are thinking of charging to go into certain areas in the Lake District.
Well, there we are. That's a novel way.
But I don't think we're considering that, Chairman. Before you read about it in the Observer.
Councillor Sam Goldman.
Thank you. Just by way of example, as it was mentioned earlier on, the purpose of this report, it says, is to provide an update on the progress and outcomes of the corporate programme and priority projects delivered to support achievement of the corporate plan, which, unless you may be a lover of alliteration, that sounds great, but we heard the average reading age is 9. Just maybe a point for members that as we think about the climate in all of our things going forward, maybe we should also think about making sure reports are accessible and finding a way to explain that to the general populace.
Okay, thank you for that point. Are we going to move this report? Just excuse me a second. Jonathan? Yeah. And Secretary? Thank you very much. If we can vote on this item, those in favour? Excellent. Thank you very much indeed. And are you going to present the next report as well, Cheryl?
No, thank you, Chair. But I would like to stay, as I'm probably going to be taking forward quite a lot of the projects. So.
So we move on to item 13, yeah? Right, okay, here we go. Oops, I've lost it. Here we go. This is your report, Ben.
Yes, thank you, Chair.
Excellent. Okay, so this is the Corporate Plan, Consultation Response and Corporate Programme 2020 to 27. So Ben Hook, Head of Service Acquisitions, Transformation and Regeneration, will update members on the outcome of that. And again, there's been a significant amount of working together on this. With members under the lead of Councillor Jonathan Vinehall. So thank you, Ben.
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I mean, obviously, what we've brought back is not at all dissimilar to what went out. I think the general response from the public was quite positive about the ambition set out within the corporate plan. And particularly how it was deconstructed into the various areas of importance and clearly articulated about what it is that this council wants to achieve within the timescales. There have been a significant number of responses, not as many as we would normally get, if I'm completely honest with you, on a corporate plan, but I think we have to be completely aware of the circumstances under which this corporate plan had been taken out to consultation. Normally we do live in-person events in the various towns to generate some publicity, answer questions and wheel out cabinet members to various areas to engage with members of the public in a physical forum, which we've been unable to do this time because of the COVID-19 pandemic. However, we have done an awful lot of online advertising and particularly pushed through social media. And I would say that members themselves have been critical in getting the word out there, and I'd like to thank members for their assistance in that. In terms of the responses, a detailed sort of analysis of the responses has been provided in Appendix B. I would just highlight that in Appendix B itself, it refers to 2 other appendices, Appendices A and B within Appendix B. Appendix A of Appendix B, if you see what I mean, is a full response from the Bexhill Chamber of Commerce, and Appendix B that would normally be attached to that report is the full response of every respondent. Now, what we would normally do is leave a member a copy of those in the members' room for members to review at any particular time. Given the current situation, we're happy to provide those to members on demand in advance of full council, so that they have the opportunity to read it. I would say it stretches into hundreds and hundreds of pages, based on the fact that it's a complete response of every respondent. So, but you have the right to read all of the responses that will come in to form your judgments going forward. I would say that in terms of the overall, the overall analysis is pretty accurate, given that I have read most of the responses that have gone with this. It was enlightening, to say the least, but the overall analysis provided in Appendix B is pretty spot on, and therefore shouldn't really affect the recommendations going forward to council. In addition to that, obviously the draft corporate plan, corporate programme has been appended to Appendix C. This is very high level. This is a list of project names that fall out of the corporate plan, and they are specifically projects. They're not sort of business as usual aspects or things that might be monitored under key performance indicators. They are specific projects that have a beginning, middle, and end, and will probably require additional resource to fulfil at some point. What we're suggesting, that in order to monitor the corporate programme in previous years, that function of the corporate programme board fell to SMT. What we're recommending this time is that it be a mixture of the senior officers, i.e. the chief executive and probably the section 151 officer as appropriate because of the resource implications, and a board of the members as selected by the leader to report to. We would normally do it on a bi-monthly or quarterly basis as an update, with an annual report then back to overview and scrutiny on the overall performance of the programme. Other than that, I'm happy to commit this report to Cabinet Chair and take any questions.
Thank you very much indeed. Ben, if Councillor Sue Project, Sue.
Were you first?
Oh, I beg your pardon. Yes, I think you were first, Catherine. Yes, Councillor Field. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you. I haven't got a great deal to say, but I'm really not surprised that this had a very poor rate of responses to the consultation, simply because the environment strategy went exactly the same way. We had an awful lot of exciting things planned with residents and drop-ins and things, and then we all got locked down and it never happened. So I think we can thank the very enthusiastic 113 that did manage to put their thoughts on paper. I'm delighted to say that 84% of respondents thought the climate emergency was very important, slightly bothered about the remaining 16%, because in my mind, that should have been 100. I don't know what we're doing to find out who they were and how to address that 16%. And I think back to the training we had, which said, your message will only be heard if it lands in the right way for the audience you're talking to. And that's what I'm thinking about the 16%. I have no answers, but I hope somebody's thinking about how we can carry on encouraging the 16% to believe in what we're doing. Thank you.
Thank you for making that point. Forgive me for not coming to you first. Sorry, Sue.
Thank you very much. And just an amazing amount of work. I mean, wading through all the comments, although you were disappointed, the actual quality of the comments was really quite high, and particularly from the groups that came back would represent many more people. The other thing I was glad you said that it's a flexible document, and because the thing is that we have been having a lot of conversations, and there's been a Healthy Rother working group talking about Healthy Rother, and you don't immediately think a district council is to do with health because you think of NHS, but the LGA have produced a paper that actually says that there's an awful lot that we do that actually supports people's health and well-being. I mean, when you just think about landscape, we're in charge of landscape, and that's what we've benefited from hugely during COVID. Housing, leisure, environmental services, even the air we breathe, so climate change. So there's a lot in our remit that we have responsibility for, where we can improve people's lives. And so there's this idea, and there's a working group working on it, of Healthy Rother. And it's quite difficult to get cross-cutting themes going in a corporate plan. I mean, we talked about a climate emergency. We thought that was a cross-cutting theme. But And it is, because it's got to be in every department. And similarly to Healthy Rother. The work that's been done, unfortunately, we came in too late for this particular consultation. But I'm sure as it's a flexible document, we can find some ways of incorporating Healthy Rother into the corporate plan. But I think it's a readable document. It's clear. We know where we're going, and we've got targets there which people will understand. So thank you for all the work.
Councillor Dixon, Kevin?
Thank you, Chairman. Just a comment on the responses from organisations, really. I think it's quite disappointing that I think we've got 27 parishes, maybe 28 now. I'll look at the Chief Executive, who's, yeah. And only 4 have responded, which is quite a shame, as we've got such a, we're getting a good relationship. And then you analyse those 4, 3 of them have no doubt been prompted by cabinet members anyway, and the other one is the chairman of RALC. So actually, no others have responded unprompted, probably, which is a shame. Maybe we can do some work on that. I do think towns and parishes are people who we need to be really on board with and making sure we're all working the same way. And I think that's a bit sad.
Okay, thanks for that, Kevin. Councillor John Barnes. John?
I'm a little puzzled by the notion that only 4 parishes responded, because I know that 2 in my area responded. But maybe their comments were too general to actually, but I wasn't going to raise it, but I have to say the notion that it was only 4 seems to me a misstatement. Can I also, while I'm speaking, just support what Councillor Project says? I think when we're talking about poverty and health inequality, we have a very major role. We really are part of the local strategic partnership. I don't think we scrutinise its work sufficiently. And maybe if we could build something about that into this, we've got a fairer society here, but it seems to be a healthy society is something we ought to build into our objectives.
Thank you, John. Yes, I think the points have been noted. Ben, did you want to make a comment on that before I invite?
Yeah, no, just about the point on the number of parishes that responded. What we've done here is where there has been a specific response on a specific item, so i.e. Objective 9 or Objective 8, the group has provided a specific response. We fed that into this report. That any general comments that have been received about the corporate plan as a whole have sort of not been included in this, but are included in the full list of full responses that is provided, that could be provided to members upon request.
Okay, thank you for clarifying that. Councillor Bayliss, Christine?
Yeah, yes, thank you very much. Well, I would like to support what Councillor Prochak talked about, and also what Councillor Barnes has alluded to, and that actually a cross-cutting theme around Healthy Rother is actually very important. In particular, I would like the corporate plan to set out an agenda or a timetable where we will start to consult on the future of leisure services within the district. So, for example, there are some rumours going around Bexhill that the Alliance has dropped the leisure centre project at that was going to be built in on the existing site in Downs Road. At the moment, that particular project is not dropped, but is paused, if you like, and or post COVID pandemic, we need to do some work around whether there is now sufficient demand or people's habits have changed to such an extent that we actually need to design a different type of project on that site. So I would support the healthy Rother inclusion and make that one of their key objectives around running a consultation, perhaps in early 2022. Thank you.
I think we have made it very clear that the leisure centre project was stalled because of the pandemic, where we were, and the financial implications. And I'm really encouraged that Sports England are now collecting data in order to identify who will be wanting to use these facilities and what they will look like in the future, because most of the leisure centre stock is like 60% of it in the country, I'm told, is like 40 years old, and there's been a massive change in what the offering should be and what it might look like in the future. Hazel.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, I'd like to echo Councillor Bayliss's request about the leisure centre consultation. I think that's really important that we do let our residents know it's not a forgotten issue, that it is just paused. And also to support Councillor Projak, because I was on the Healthy Rother working group along with Councillor Thomas and Councillor Cook. And so it would be wonderful if it could actually be included as a specific goal of ours, to always be looking at how we can improve the lives and health of our current residents. Thank you.
Okay. If I can just invite Councillor Cortell and then then Ben Hook and then Jonathan Bindhall to bring this together. Thank you.
Thank you, Chair. What particularly excites me about this corporate plan is that our vision is to put our residents at the heart of all we do. I think that's a massive improvement, and it's what we as a council should be about, putting our residents first.
I appreciate you making that statement, because I think that's very, very important. You know, our residents are our customers, and we do need to put them first in all respect. Ben, would you just like to make a couple of observations before Jonathan?
Yeah, no, thank you, Chair. I just really wanted to address the healthy Rother point, and I think it's a really important aspect of what's going forward. It's not something I've been particularly involved in, and so I'd like to gain some more knowledge about that, and actually more specifically how we shape that into an activity that we as a council can undertake and include in the corporate plan. What I suppose from my perspective, what I'd like to encourage Cabinet, and it's completely down to yourselves as to how you want to take that forward, is that we propose the corporate plan as is to get it adopted and really get work underway, but then provide you an undertaking that me and the other officers will take the healthy living part away with us and really work something out to bring something forward as quickly as possible for further inclusion into the plan. And as it's been said, that this should be a living document. This shouldn't be something that sits static on a shelf and nobody ever remembers. It should be something that we look to constantly review and update and increase in further inclusion. So I wouldn't want to hold up the current adoption, but I do take your point, and as it's something that is really important that we would like to take away and really think about how, not only what it is that we should be delivering as a result of the Healthy Rother work, but how we would deliver it as well, so that we can provide recommendations to Cabinet and Council, that are both feasible and realistic.
Yep, thank you for those comments. Ben, if I can invite Councillor Jonathan Bindhall, please.
Yes, if I could leave the healthy living comment to last. Firstly, thank you for Ben and his team, and actually all the members as well, because I think we've had some part of this discussion before. It's been brought together by everybody, and that's a good thing. The objective was to have very clear objectives which are quantified, objectives which were clearly time-bounded, so that we are aiming at things that we can achieve. And that is the other point. It's designed to be a document of objectives that we can actually achieve. We have the primary role in the large majority of cases. It is a top-level document, and just to John Barnes' point, and it's not with the intention of not over-binding us as a council and allowing us some flexibility. So when you read the current one, it's just been closed down or finished, there are very specific objectives in some areas, and we didn't do that, but there's probably a good reason for that. And there needs to be that little bit of flexibility in the plan. So, when you talk about achieving housing numbers, we can achieve the ones that we have control over, but as we can see from the current plan, you can't achieve the ones you don't have control over. So having a plan that we can achieve is probably and is focused. And it's also about the amount of resource that we have as well. It's focusing that resource and giving the officers very clear direction so they know exactly where we're going. And I think that we're there. I think officers are happy with the plan. Everyone's had that level of input. I don't think there's anything in there that hasn't been fully agreed all round. It is difficult to have objectives which cut across all areas, like the climate emergency, for example. But I think the plan is well dovetailed, as dovetailed as you can get. I think that in terms of the responses, I think that it's been responded to really well. And I'm pleased. I should have declared that I'm actually the chairman of Settlescombe Parish Council, and we did respond, although I didn't personally respond. And it is difficult to get parish councils to respond because they have to come up with a response which they all agree. And that takes a lot of time. You know, different parish councils do it different ways, but it is quite challenging for the bigger consultations. So that's probably the reason for that. And maybe we need to figure out a different way to get that input in. There are two comments that I thought were interesting. One was the empowered organisation, where the majority of organisations disagreed that the objective should be included, but they agree the proposed actions, which is a little confusing because I don't know how you can agree that the actions are right, but the objective is wrong. But that may just have been the way it's expressed. And I was really pleased that the objective that had the greatest response in terms of agreement was the Open Council. And I think we've already seen that, the fact that we're being live streamed here today and that we have really put a lot of emphasis behind that, tells us that we are correct in the assumption that people really want openness, transparency and accessibility. And I think we've achieved that as well. So I think all of that is good, and it takes a lot of work to get these plans together. So I hope that we're all happy with that. Turning to the final point, which is the healthy rather, and unfortunately this was something which came forward that a number of members wanted to include, and I think I think the momentum has grown for this. It wasn't included in the original part of the plan and therefore the consultation, and unfortunately those who were working on it just didn't get that detail together in time for the consultation. What I was going to suggest, and I think it's good for Ben to comment on this, is that perhaps we do include an objective, and I'm sorry that I haven't mentioned this before because I only thought of it a short while ago, Ben, but you can comment on this. But perhaps we include an objective, we adopt the plan, but in parallel we include a recommendation to have an objective to develop a healthy living strategy, because it obviously needs time to develop and to really understand the dimensions of that. We can't actually formally agree a plan here because we don't know what the correct plan is, which could include things like the leisure facilities and so forth. What are your thoughts on that?
Jonathan, we're losing you for
Ben, what are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, sorry, Chair, if I may. I mean, my main concern was that an inclusion of something that hadn't yet had the opportunity to go to public consultation at this late stage was sort of not giving the public the opportunity to make that comment on it. But I think by including the opportunity for the development of a healthy living strategy, then we'll give people the opportunity to comment on that strategy once it's fully formed, rather than the idea of it. So I think that's an appropriate way forward.
Thank you. But I think you almost implied that, Ben, in your comment earlier before Jonathan made that a particular statement. So yeah, I think that's a very well intended way of dealing with this particular issue. Kevin.
Councillor Vinehall's reminded me that I should also declare an interest that my wife is the parish clerk of Breed Parish Council, who also did respond.
Okay, thank you for that. Are any other comments before we actually vote on this? And are we going to amend the recommendation in any way?
Well, I would propose that with the amendment that we should have a second recommendation to develop a healthy living strategy, which would be subject to consultation, and then be an addition to the plan later in the year as that develops.
That sounds a very practical way of dealing with that. I think you're okay with that, Ben. Thank you. Yeah, and if we can move forward on this, Jonathan is
seconding.
Yep, and thank you very much indeed. So if we can vote on that. Sue, did you want to make any other comment? No, fine, thank you. Those in favour? That's unanimous. Thank you very much indeed. And thank you again for all the work that's been put into that. You know, it's been a difficult time bringing these this sort of plan together, because you know it's just been so many other demands on every officer and member. So I think we've done exceptionally well to get it to the timescale that we have. We move on to agenda item 15. Edgerton Park leased tennis courts, disposal of public open space. To determine the letting of tennis courts at Edgerton Park. This is to give them continued tenure, security of tenure, I assume. This is with you, Ben.
Thank you, Chairman. Yes. So this is just to sort of reiterate from the original report. This the Bexhill Tennis Club do currently lease courts 3 and 4 from us as part of their for their exclusive use. What they're asking for is effectively to change that to courts 3 and 5, purely because the entrance to 5 is much closer to the little pavilion that they have there, and it makes it easier for them to conduct coaching sessions and so on and so forth. So we have had 3 responses to the advert for disposal of public open space. They emanate firstly from Linda Butcher, who was the interim clerk for the Bexhill Parish Council following its formation, and then two others that do sort of relate to that initial query. I have responded directly to Linda Butcher on this matter, just to say, just to reiterate what and clarify what the position is in that it's actually not really new leases, it's just a change to the existing one, but because of legal procedures we have to do a declaration of a disposal of public open space. So in effect it wouldn't necessarily impact on any decisions that the new Bexhill Parish Council should choose to make or not, because those would already have been leased out. It's just a different court that's been offered up. So I hope that that provides members with a sense of security that we've addressed that issue. But I'm happy to take it up again at any point in the future. So I have to take any questions.
Thank you very much for clarifying that, Ben, because I think there was a little bit of a misunderstanding by 1 or 2 people who thought we were giving something away before the formation of a new town council, or a town council wanting a bigger say in it. Councillor Timpey, did you want to make any observation?
Yeah, no, I fully support this, and I'm pleased we had a little chat, Ben. You did respond to Linda Butcher. Because that was essential that she did get a reply from us at least. I noticed though that one of the objectors accuses us of asset stripping, which I don't know if you actually responded to that particular issue or not, but it's obviously nothing to do with that. It's just purely securing the tenure of the tennis club as it is, moving the courts around, and having a very short lease. And if the Bexhill Town Council at some point takes over that particular area, so be it. But at the moment, it remains with us and remains on this lease. So I fully recommend it and would like to move. Thank you.
And is there anyone to second that? I think it's in your ward, Christine, is it? Yeah, what a good idea. Yep, thank you very much indeed. And if we can vote on that. Thank you, that's unanimous. It's been quite a long session tonight. I think we're almost there, are we not? So thank you for your patience. Item 16. Okay, this is the council restructure. Purpose of the report is that provide members of the changes to the senior officer structure to best meet the needs of the corporate plan, to seek approval for changes to the statutory posts of Chief Finance Officer and Monitoring Officer. Welcome.
Thank you, Chairman. The report, I think, is self-explanatory. As we move into an era of delivering on a very ambitious corporate plan, I believe that we need to have the right structure in place to actually help us to deliver that. What I'm proposing in this is to basically make the role of chief executive that of a strategic role, to work alongside senior managers to look at that, and then delivery focused in 2 posts underneath that, a very clear deputy post and also a director's post. There will be, as a result of this, some changes to people's jobs, and those are detailed in that. 2 specifically are the post of the Section 151 officer and the monitoring officer. The reason for bringing this report on that element tonight is that requires full council approval because of its changes to the statutory posts. We have been consulting on this stage. Most of the comments, sorry, not most of them, a number of comments we've got back actually relate to the second stage. But in general terms, the comments so far were generally around requesting clarity, particularly on the process and procedure that we'll be going through to deal with this. In addition to the changes, what I'm asking tonight is that both posts, because they are director roles, will require member panels to be appointed. I think it's a decision for members as to whether that is a single panel or two panels. And I'm suggesting that the leader of the council, in consultation with group leaders, agrees, and I'm suggesting 5 members to sit on the panels. I'm happy to take any questions on it. The timescale is quite tight. It is deliberately tight to enable a focus on it, because I think we need to move quickly. We're going to move ahead with the delivery of our corporate plan, which will be agreed by full council. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Malcolm. If I can invite Catherine, please.
Yes, thank you. Delighted to see that the Climate Emergency and the Environment will have a proper director in charge of the work. I think that should help us move forward much more quickly and be very effective. Thank you. Now I'm going to have a little record made of the next bit. Looking at the tick box section at the end, I think equalities and diversity always apply to staffing issues.
I didn't, because it's implicit in our staffing policies.
But if the box is going to be there, it needs to be ticked. If it's implicit, don't bother with the box. It's my view.
Chairman, the point is taken.
Thank you for that. Are there any? Yep. Before I invite Councillor Dixon, Councillor Courtell.
A question for Mr. Johnson, please. What is the feedback on this from staff side and the unions?
As I've said to you, nobody who actually says it shouldn't happen, and the rationale for it happening is agreed. The feedback has been around the process and the procedure that we are going through, which we have reassured people will follow our existing employment policies and also our existing employment stability policies in the event that either of those, well, not in the event, they will be needed, so they will be followed. So that has been the gist of the feedback. And a few of them have been around specific posts and what is happening with that post. And we've taken all the points and we'll be feeding back to Unison staff side on those points.
I am right in saying there's been an informal and a formal consultation with all staff that are involved in some way.
Any staff at current head of service level, I have spoken to all of them individually. They've also put a collective response in, but I've continued those discussions with people, I mean, right up until this afternoon.
Sorry, John, I omitted to invite you to speak before Councillor Courtell.
It's all right. I don't mind waiting my turn. I'm uneasy about this. We are in danger of putting cart before horse, and I'll explain my unease. At a time when most organisations are moving to a flat management structure, we seem to be moving to a hierarchical one. My second doubt is I would have thought green needs to run right across all directorates. I'm a little uneasy that it's put into one of the two boxes, but that's almost inevitable because you've gone for 2 boxes. I personally would have preferred appointing a deputy and a flatter management structure. My other worry in that Directorate of Place and Climate is you've almost built in a conflict of interest because there is a lot there about building and there's also all about planning. And again, that's because you've created 2 boxes and a hierarchical structure. So just to express genuine caution about whether you've actually got this one right. What is difficult for us on the back benches is we've not seen the report from IESE. We haven't seen extensive rationale for why you've done this.
I can understand why it might be a confidential paper, but really when I read this paper, the reasoning that underlies what you're doing is very thin indeed. And my last doubt, although I think it's helpful that the CFO is going to be in the Chief Executive's department, but there is a tendency, it seems to me, to be playing down finance at a time when actually, as we all see, finance is going to be crucial over the next 2 or 3 years, because this authority is facing some pretty grave financial problems. So forgive me if I express those doubts. I would like to understand the reasoning a great deal more than I do at the moment.
Yes, thank you. Malcolm, would you like to respond?
Yes, thank you, Chairman. I mean, first of all, I entirely agree with Councillor Barnes that the climate change and green issues, if you like, environmental issues, should be across the whole organisation. But I also firmly believe that they need to be led across the whole organisation, and that the best way to deal with that is to give them a priority in the organisation. And as to my rationale for doing it, I have to say it's been brought about by experience, which is we got rid of we changed to 2 directors and went to a single chief executive who has heads of service reporting directly into that post. And what that has meant is that post has been taken up a significant amount of time in dealing with operational issues that I think need to be dealt with at a director level post to give the chief executive time to do the things that a chief executive should be doing, which is looking at place building, looking at place making, looking at developing and collaborating with other organisations and moving forward on that score. In terms of the IESE review, I'm very happy because I've only just received a copy the other day to make all 135 pages of the final report available. But I would stress it dealt with one service area. It was not a review of the organisation. I can accept Councillor Barnes may feel my logic is have I got it right? In answer, I believe yes. I've had from September, basically October last year to develop this. This has been brought about by experience, but I have to say also by discussion with other heads of service, where there is a feeling that we're trying to spread things too thin. And yes, you know, some organisations are going for a flatter structure, but this isn't actually still a particularly hierarchical structure. I mean, when you look at what will come underneath it, it goes from from chief executive to director straight into basically operational level. And I think this is a more effective way for us to deliver the ambitions of this authority and actually to deliver those more effectively and to allow people to focus on issues. But going back to what we talked about earlier with the corporate plan, any organizational structure these days has to be flexible and it has to respond. And I have been asked in the past, is this a permanent structure? Well, it probably depends on what your definition of permanency is. It is the structure to see us through the next period of time. There may come a point in time when we will think, actually, other things are coming in. We need to look again at that. So I'm sorry, Councillor Barnes, you did make another point, and it's completely escaped me what it was. Oh, the Chief Finance Officer. Actually, what I've tried to do in the Chief Executive's office is to really focus on the core of the organisation. So that's got HR, policy, finance, financial services, democratic services, and elections, which are the things that really, from a central point of view, if you like, drive the organisation or work across the organisation. There is an element when I came up with the structure that what it could have been, let's chuck everything up in the air and see what it comes down as, but I don't think that would have been effective, because what I've tried to do is to look at what we are trying to deliver and come up with a structure that I believe gives us the best way of delivering that.
Right, if I can invite Councillor Ryan-Hall and then Kevin.
Yeah, no, yes, and I wanted to just sort of pick up on a couple of points John made too. That's all right. Yeah, I just want to pick up because actually there was a point you made about the corporate plan or the previous plan in terms of delivery in North Bexhill. And one of the comments I wanted to make was that unless we have the jobs, we don't have the people buying the houses. Simple as that. And that's one of the underlying issues in our in Rother. Unless you start generating employment, you're not going to attract people here to live. And I know that this is an issue that Councillor Bayliss has been trying to sort of hammer home for the last couple of years. And we have a service at the moment in planning, because that's the area of my interest, which has performed a statutory function and has not really taken on board the corporate plan. And the local plan is an unusual animal in that it has to do certain statutory things, which takes it outside the organisation, but it is also subsidiary to the corporate plan as well. It has to perform those two things at the same time. And at the moment, it doesn't, because that's not the way we've had that function. So bringing that together with regeneration is going to really help us deliver housing, which at the moment we're not doing, because everybody's responsible, but nobody's responsible. And that's been an ongoing problem for a number of years, and it's becoming a problem that's really in focus now with new housing targets and all sorts of discussions. So I would agree with Malcolm that actually in the area of the organisation that needs to be flat, it is flatter, and that's a good thing, because it takes some people out of roles where they're somewhere in between operational strategic. We neither really one nor the other. So I think it's a really positive change. And you've got the two areas, one which is about delivering housing and regeneration, and one which is really about delivering the key services that authorities have to deliver, whether it's rehoming, homing homeless people, or housing issues. So that would be my thought on the matter.
Thank you, Jonathan. And just a point that I think you raised, John, regarding the AZ report, which was planning specific. There was a feedback to the towns and parish councillors last Friday, and there is an arrangement that there will be a presentation, a briefing to all members, because that's very, very important. But the report came back in the draft form. It was then some work was done on it, and the actual document proper, if you like, is now back in our possession. And Malcolm will be bringing that together for briefing for all members. Sorry, Sue, did you want to make a comment?
Just a comment, and I think Malcolm would expect me to make this comment, because we've just started launching on this initiative with customer services. And certainly my conversations with customer services, they say that they would like to be a core service. And I know Malcolm has said that's not appropriate, but there's no mention of them in the plan there. And I'm sure Malcolm would expect me to say, where do they sit? Because one of the things that we have recently decided, I think, is that we should give them value, and the value that they provide for this council.
Welcome.
Sorry, Chip, they are listed under housing and customer services on the.
Just testing.
I appreciated the test, Chairman, just to make sure I'd read my own report. Yeah.
Your own report. Right, Kevin, thank you.
Thank you, Chairman. I think we should point out from the word go that this is a Chief Executive's decision and plan. This isn't for Cabinet to decide. This is ultimately for Council to approve, but this is the Chief Executive's plan, and this is what he's telling us he is doing, not for us to decide. So, that's what we must accept. Taking Councillor Barnes's point, I think one of the issues with the Assistant Director of Resources role at the moment is that finance isn't the total job that Robin has to do. Robin is currently responsible for HR, the print room, for IT, and other services as well as finance. And what Councillor Barnes says is true. What's coming up is a difficult financial situation, and we need someone dedicated to finance, and that is what Malcolm's plan does give us. It gives us a chief finance officer who is the council's finance manager, and that will be someone that will be totally finance. That is as a cabinet member for finance, I think that is a very good plan. if that, and we don't necessarily need to talk about individuals, but if that, the fact that the assistant director of resources post will be deleted could be a sad day for the council, if that means that Robin does move on for a variety of his own personal reasons, and that is entirely up to him. And I would like to tell everyone he is content with that, and that there's nothing that untoward is going on with that. I think it's quite important that someone who has been here as long as Robin is afforded that courtesy. Chairman.
Thank you, Kevin. And I would just reiterate the fact that when Malcolm was appointed in the role back in September, it was quite clear that we felt that he needed to bring together a structure that he felt he could achieve the aspirations of this administration. And as Kevin quite pointed out, this is an operational restructure. Malcolm has thought long and hard about this, and he's consulted all his senior managers on this, and externally as well. And this is an opportunity of us just bringing this forward this evening so that people are aware. And thank you very much indeed. Malcolm, is there any other observations you want to make this evening?
No, Chairman. I just remind that the actual posts themselves will go to full council just because the changes need to be noted by full council. This was to note so Cabinet was aware. Thank you for the comments. I probably wouldn't have put them quite as direct myself, but you can in a way maybe I can't. But I think what I'm trying to do with this is that the view I've taken in all of this is that we've been working together on this. So I only thought it was right that Cabinet formally had the opportunity to at least have a look at it and discuss it. And as time goes on, I will continue with the consultation. I've given that assurance to all my colleagues that I will do that. What we've achieved so far, we've achieved by agreement, and I see no reason why, by and large, we can't continue with that. But that will depend on the next stage of the consultation, obviously, and the feedback. And also, I will want a view from the individuals concerned about what they might want, because although it is my structure, I will be working closely with particularly two senior officers, and I would value their input into what they see. And some of those boxes may change. They may change over time as our priorities change. That's what we've got to keep in mind. Not those boxes, Councillor Field, the big boxes.
Right, if I can propose this report, and someone can second it for me.
Seconded. Thank
you very much. And if we can vote on the recommendation and resolution contained within the report. Those in favour, thank you very much indeed. And I think that concludes our business for this evening at 8, what was that, 40 something? 41.